Chapter 9 of Stand By for Mars. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Sean O'Hara. Stand By for Mars by Carey Rockwell. Chapter 9. The three members of the Polaris unit stepped off the slidewalk at the Academy spaceport and stood before Warrant Officer McKinney. "There she is," said the stubby spaceman, pointing to the gleaming spaceship resting not 200 feet away.
"The rocket cruiser Polaris, the newest and fastest ship in space."
He faced the three boys with a smile.
"And she's all yours. You earned her."
Mouths open, Tom, Roger, and Astro stood gaping in fascination at the mighty spaceship resting on a concrete ramp. Her long, 200-foot polished beryllium steel hull mirrored the spaceport scene around them. The tall buildings of the Academy, the ready line of space destroyers and scouts, and the hundreds of maintenance non-coms of the enlisted Solar Guard, their scarlet uniforms spotted with grime, were all reflected back to the Polaris unit as they eyed the sleek ship from the needle-like nose of her bow to the stubby opening of her rocket exhausts. Not a seam or rivet could be seen in her hull. At the top of the ship, near her nose, a large blister made of 6-inch clear crystal indicated the radar bridge. 12 feet below it, 6 round window ports showed the position of the control deck. Surrounding the base of the ship was an aluminum scaffold with a ladder over 100 feet high anchored to it. The top rung of the ladder just reached the power deck emergency hatch, which was swung open like a giant plug, revealing the thickness of the hull, nearly a foot.
"Well,"
roared the red-clad spaceman,
"don't you want to climb aboard and see what your ship looks like from the inside?"
"Do we?" cried Tom, and made a headlong dash for the scaffold. Astro let out one of his famous yells, and followed right at his heels. Roger watched them running ahead and started off at a slow walk. But suddenly, no longer able to resist, he broke into a dead run. Those around the Polaris stopped their work to watch the three cadets scramble up the ladder. Most of the ground crew were ex-spacemen like McKinney, no longer able to blast off because of acceleration reaction, and they smiled knowingly, remembering their reactions to their first spaceship. Inside the massive cruiser, the boys roamed over every deck, examining the ship excitedly. "Say, look at this!" cried Tom. He stood in front of the control board and ran his hands over the button and switches. "This board makes the manual we worked on at the Academy look like it's ready for the Galaxy Hall."
Yo!
3 decks below, Astro had discovered the rocket motors, 4 of the most powerful ever installed on a spaceship, enabling the Polaris to outrace any ship in space. Roger stuck his head through the radar bridge hatch and gazed in awe at the array of electronic communications, detection radar, and astrogation gear. With lips pulled into a thin line, he mumbled to himself, "Too bad they didn't give you this kind of equipment."
"What did you say, Roger?"
asked Astro, climbing alongside to peer into the radar bridge. Startled, Roger turned and stammered, Nothing. Looking around, Astro commented,
"This place looks almost as good as that power deck."
"Of course," said Roger. "They could have placed that astrogation prism a little closer to the chart table. Now I'll have to get up every time I want to take a sight on the stars."
"Don't you ever get tired of complaining?"
asked Astro. "Rock it off," snarled Roger. "Hey guys," yelled Tom from below. "Better get down here. Captain Strong's coming aboard." Climbing back down the ladder to the control deck, Astro leaned over his shoulder and asked Roger,
"You really think you'll let us take this baby up for a hot manning?"
"Get your head out of that cloud, Astro. You'll pull about 5 weeks of dry runs before this baby gets 5 inches off the ground."
"I wouldn't be too sure of that, Manning."
Strong's voice boomed out as he climbed up through the control deck hatch. The three boys immediately snapped to attention. Strong walked around the control deck, fingering the controls lightly. "This is a fine ship," he mused aloud, "and one of the finest that scientific brains can build. She's yours. The day you graduate from the Academy, if you graduate, and I can think of about 1,000 reasons why you won't, you'll command an armed rocket cruiser similar to this. As a matter of fact, the only difference between this ship and those that patrol the space lanes now is in the armament." "Don't we have any arms aboard at all, sir?" asked Tom. "Small arms like parallel ray pistols and parallel ray rifles, plus 4 atomic warheads for emergency use," replied Strong. Seeing a puzzled expression cross Astro's face, the Solar Guard officer continued, "You haven't studied armament yet, Astro, but parallel rays are the only weapons used by law enforcement agencies in the Solar Alliance. They work on the principle of controlled energy, sending out a ray with an effective range of 50 yards that can paralyze the nervous system of any beast or human." "And doesn't kill, sir?" inquired Astro. "No, Astro. Paralyzing a man is just as effective as killing him. The Solar Alliance doesn't believe you have to kill anyone, not even the most vicious criminal. Freeze him and capture him, and you still have the opportunity to make him a useful citizen." "But if you can't?" inquired Roger dryly. "Then he is kept on a prison asteroid where he can't harm anyone." Strong turned away abruptly. "But this isn't time for a general discussion. We've got work to do." He walked over to the master control panel and switched the teleceiver screen. There was a slight buzz, and a view of the spaceport outside the ship suddenly came into focus, filling the screen. Strong flipped a switch, and a view aft of the Polaris filled the glowing screen. The aluminum scaffolding was being hauled away by a jet truck. Again, the view changed as Strong twisted the dials in front of him. "Just scanning the outside, boys," he commented. "You have to make sure there isn't anyone near the ship when we blast off. The rocket exhaust is powerful enough to blow a man 200 feet, to say nothing of burning him to death." "You mean, sir?" began Tom, not daring to hope. "Of course, Corbett," smiled Strong. "Take your stations for blastoff. We raise ship as soon as we get orbital clearance from the spaceport control." Without waiting for further orders, the three boys scurried to their stations. Soon the muffled whine of the energizing pumps on the power deck began to ring through the ship, along with the steady beep of the radar scanner on the radar bridge. Tom checked the maze of gauges and dials on the control board. Airlocks, hatches, oxygen supply, circulating systems, circuits, and feeds. In 5 minutes, 200-foot shining steel hull was a living thing, as her rocket motors purred, warming up for the initial thrust. Tom made a last sweeping check of the complicated board, and turned to Captain Strong, who stood to one side watching. "Ship ready to blast off, sir," he announced. "Shall I check stations and proceed to raise ship?" "Carry on, Cadet Corbett," Strong replied. "Log yourself in as skipper, with me along as supercargo. I'll ride in the second pilot's chair." Tom snapped a sharp salute and added vocally, "Aye, aye, sir." He turned back to the control board, strapped himself into the command pilot's seat, and opened the circuits of the spaceport control tower. "Rocket cruiser Polaris to spaceport control," he droned in the microphone. "Check in." "Spaceport control to Polaris," the voice of the control tower operator replied. "You are cleared for blastoff in 2 minutes. Take out orbit 75. Repeat, 75. Polaris to spaceport control. Orders received and understood. End transmission." Tom then turned his attention to the station check. "Control deck to radar deck. Check in." "Radar deck, aye. Ready to raise ship." Roger's voice was relaxed, easy. Tom turned to the board to adjust the teleceiver screen for a clear picture of the stern of the ship. Gradually it came up in as sharp a focus as if he'd been standing on the ground. He checked the electric timing device in front of him that ticked off the seconds as a red hand crawled around to 0, and then swept down to the 30-second mark. Tom pulled the microphone to his lips again. "Control deck to power deck. Check in." "Power deck, aye." "Energize the cooling pumps." "Cooling pumps, aye," repeated Astro. "Feed reactant." "Reactant at D9 rate." From 70 feet below them, Strong and Tom heard the hiss of the reactant mass feeding into the rocket motors, and the screeching whine of the mighty pumps that kept the mass from building too quickly and exploding. The second hand swept up to the 20-second mark. "Control deck to radar deck," called Tom. "Do we have a clear trajectory forward?" "All clear forward and overhead," replied Roger. Tom placed his hand on the master switch that would throw the combined circuits, instruments, and gauges into the single act of blasting the mighty ship into space. His eyes glued on the sweeping hand, he counted past the 12-second mark to 11, 10, 9. "Stand by to raise ship," he bawled in the microphone. "-5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Tom threw the master switch. There was a split-second pause, then the great ship roared into life. Slowly at first, she lifted her tail full of roaring jets free of the ground. 10 feet, 20, 50, 100, 500, 1,000. Picking up speed at an incredible rate, Tom felt himself being pushed deeper and deeper into the softness of the acceleration cushions. He'd been worried about not being able to keep his eyes open to see the dwindling Earth and teleceiver over his head, but the tremendous force of the rockets pushing him against gravity to tear the 200 tons of steel away from the Earth's grip held his eyelids open for him. As the powerful rockets tore deeper into the gap that separated the ship from Earth, he saw the spaceport gradually grow smaller. The rolling hills around the Academy closed in, and then the Academy itself, with the Tower of Galileo shrinking to a white stick, was lost in the brown and green that was Earth. The rockets pushed harder and harder, and he saw the needle of the acceleration gauge creep slowly up. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 miles a second. When the awful crushing weight of his body seemed unbearable, when he felt as though he would never be able to draw another breath, suddenly the pressure lifted and Tom felt amazingly and wonderfully buoyant. He seemed to be floating in midair, his body rising against the web straps of his chair. With a start and momentary wave of panic, he realized he was floating. Only the straps kept him from rising to the ceiling of the control room. Recovering quickly, he realized that he was in free fall. The ship had cleared the pull of Earth's gravity and was in open space where everything was weightless. Reaching towards the control panel, he flipped a switch for the synthetic gravity generator and, Seconds later, he felt the familiar reassuring sensation of the chair under him as the generator supplied the artificial gravity field to the ship. As he loosened the straps of his chair, he noticed Captain Strong rising from the position beside him, and he grinned sheepishly in answer to the twinkle in Strong's eyes. "It's all right, Tom," reassured Strong. "Happens to everyone the first time. Carry on." "Aye, aye, sir," replied Tom as he turned to the microphone. "Control deck to all stations. We are in space. Observe standard cruise procedure."
Power deck, aye,
was Astro's blasting answer over the loudspeaker.
"Who? Out here where we belong at last." "Radar bridge here."
Roger's voice chimed in softly on the speaker.
"Everything under control. And Astro, you belong in the zoo if you're going to bellow like that." "Oh, rock it off, bubblehead."
The big Venusian's reply was good-natured. He was too happy to let Roger get under his skin. "All right, you two," interrupted Tom. "Knock it off. We're on a ship now. Let's cut the kindergarten stuff."
"Aye, aye, skipper."
Astro was irrepressible.
"Yes, sir."
Roger's reply was soft, but Tom recognized the biting edge to the last word. Turning away from the controls, he faced Captain Strong, who had been watching quietly. "Polaris spaceborne at 933 hours, Captain Strong. All stations operating efficiently." "Very competent job, Corbett," nodded Strong in approval. "He handled the ship as if he'd been doing it for years." "Thank you, sir." "We'll just cruise for a while on this orbit, so you boys can get the feel of the ship and of space." The Solar Guard officer took Tom's place in the command pilot's chair. "You knock off for a while. Go up the radar bridge and have a look around. I'll take over here." "Yes, sir." Tom turned and had to restrain himself from racing up the ladder to the radar bridge. When he climbed through the hatch to Roger's station, he found his unit mate tilted back in his chair, staring through the crystal blister over his head. "Hey, you space boy," smiled Roger. He indicated the blister. "Take a look at the wide, deep, and high." Tom looked up and saw the deep blackness that was space. "It's just like looking into a mirror, Roger," he breathed in awe. "Only there isn't any other side. No reflection. It just doesn't stop, does it?" "Nope," commented Roger. "It just goes on and on and on. And no one knows where it stops. No one can even guess."
"Ah, you've just got a touch of space fever," laughed Astro. "You'd better take it easy, pal."
Tom suppressed a smile. Now, for the first time, he felt there was a chance to achieve unity among them. Kill him with kindness, he thought. That's the way to do it.
"All right now, boys."
Captain Strong's voice crackled over the speaker.
"Time to pull up your eyeballs and get back to work. We're heading back to the spaceport. Take your stations for landing."
Tom and Astro immediately jumped towards the open hatch and started scrambling down the ladder towards their respective stations, while Roger strapped himself into the chair in front of the astrogation panel. Within 60 seconds, the ship was ready for landing procedures. At a nod from Captain Strong, who again strapped himself into the second pilot's chair, Tom began the delicate operations. Entering Earth's atmosphere, Tom gave a series of rapid orders for course changes and power adjustments, and then, depressing the master turn control, spun the ship around so that she would settle stern first towards the ramp of the Academy spaceport.
"Radar deck to control deck,"
called Roger over the intercom.
1,000 feet to touchdown."
"Control deck, aye," answered Tom. "Control deck to power deck. Check in,"
"Power deck, aye,"
replied Astro. "Stand by to adjust thrust to maximum drive at my command," ordered Tom.
"Power deck, aye."
The great ship, balanced perfectly in the hot exhaust, slowly slipped towards the ground.
500 feet to touchdown,"
warned Roger. "Main rockets, full blast," ordered Tom. The sudden blast of the powerful jet slowed the descent of the ship, and finally, 50 feet above the ground, Tom snapped out another order. "Cut main rockets, hold auxiliary." A moment later, there was a gentle bump, and the Polaris rested on the ramp, her nose pointed towards heaven. "Touchdown!" yelled Tom. "Cut everything, fellas, and come up here to sign a logbook. We made it, our first stop in space. We're spacemen." End of Chapter 9. Stand By for Mars by Carey Rockwell. Chapter 10.
"Next event will be..."
Warrant Officer McKenny's voice boomed over the loudspeaker and echoed over the Academy Stadium.
"Last semifinal round of Mercury Ball. Polaris unit versus Arcturus unit."
As 2,000 Space Cadets crowded in the grandstands watching the annual Academy tournament rose to their feet and cheered lustily, Tom Corbett turned to his unit mates Astro and Roger and called enthusiastically, "Okay, fellows, let's go out there and show them how to play this game." During the 2 days of the tournament, Tom, Roger, and Astro, competing as a unit against all the other Academy units, had piled up a tremendous amount of points in all the events. But so had Unit 77K, now known as the Capella unit. Now, with the Capella unit already in the finals, the Polaris crew had to win the semi-final round against Arcturus in order to meet the Capella in the final round for Academy honors.
"This is going to be a cinch," boasted Astro. "I'm going to burn 'em up."
"Save it for the field," said Tom with a smile. "Yeah, you big Venusian ape," added Roger. "Make points instead of space gas." Stripped to the waist, wearing shorts and soft three-quarter-length space boots, the three boys walked out onto the sun-baked field, amid the rousing cheers from the stands. Across the field, the cadets of the Arcturus unit walked out to meet them, stopping beside McKenny in the midfield line. Mike waited with 6 boys to form a circle around him while he held the mercury ball, a 12-inch plastic sphere filled with air and the tricky tube of mercury. "You all know the rules," announced Mike abruptly. "Head, shoulders, feet, or any part of the body except your hands can touch the ball. Polaris unit will defend the north goal," he said, pointing towards the white chalk line 50 feet away. "Arcturus, the south," and he pointed to a line equally distant in the opposite direction. 5-minute periods with 1 minute rest in between. All clear? As captain of the Polaris unit, Tom nodded while smiling at the captain of the Arcturus team, a tow-headed boy with short, chunky legs named Skahari. "All clear, Mike." "All clear here, Mike," responded Skahari. "All right, shake hands and take your places." The 6 boys shook hands and jogged towards their respective opposite lines. Mike waited for them to reach their goal lines, then placed his ball in the middle of the chalk-drawn circle. Towing the line, Tom, Roger, and Astro eyed the Arcturus crew and prepared for the dash to the ball. "All right, fellas," urged Tom. "Let's show them something." "Yeah," breathed Astro. "Just let me get these size 13s on that pumpkin before it starts twisting around." Astro wanted the advantage of the first kick of the ball while the mercury tube inside was still quiet. Once the mercury was agitated, the ball would be as easy to kick as well-greased steel. "We'll block for you, Astro." And he put every ounce of beef you've got into that first kick. If we're lucky, we might be able to get the jump on them. "Cut the chatter," snapped Roger nervously. "Baldy's ready to give us the go-ahead." Standing on the sidelines, Warrant Officer McKenny slowly raised his hand, and the crowd in the grandstand hushed in eager anticipation. A second passed, and then there was a tremendous roar as he brought his hand down and blew heavily on the whistle. Running as if their lives depended on it, the 6 cadets of the 2 units raced headlong towards the ball. Tom, just a little faster than Roger or Astro, flashed down the field and veered off to block the advancing Skahari. Roger, following him, charged into Swift, the second member of the Arcturus crew. Astro, a few feet in back of them, running with surprising speed for his size, saw that it was going to be a close race between himself and Alan, the third member of the Arcturus unit. He bowed his head and drove himself harder, the roar of the crowd filling his ears.
Go, Astro! Go, Astro!
Pounding down for the kick, Astro gauged his stride perfectly, and with one last, mighty leap, swung his right foot at the ball. There was a loud thud, drowned by the roar of the crowd, as the ball sailed over the ground with terrific force. And then, almost immediately, there was another thud as Alan rose up in a desperate leap to block the ball with his shoulder. It caromed off at a crazy angle, wobbled in its flight as Mercury within rolled from side to side. Swift of the Arcturus crew reached the ball first and sent it sailing at an angle over Tom's head to bounce 30 feet away. Seeing Astro charge the ball, Tom threw a block at Alan to knock him out of the play. The big Venusian, judging his stride to be off a little, shortened his steps to move in for the kick. But just as he brought his foot forward to make contact, the ball spun away to the left. Astro's foot continued in a perfect arc over his head, throwing him in a heap on the ground. 2,000 voices from the stands roared out in one peal of laughter. While Astro lay on the ground with the wind knocked out of him, Skahari and Swift converged on the ball. With Astro down and Tom out of position, the Arcturus unit seemed certain for scoring. But again, the ball rolled crazily, this time straight to Roger, the last defender. He nudged it between his opponents towards Tom, who, in turn, kicked it obliquely past Alan, back to Roger again. Running with the grace and speed of an antelope, the blonde cadet met the ball in midfield, and when it dropped to the ground in front of him, sent it soaring across his goal with one powerful kick. As the cadets in the stand sent up a tumultuous cheer for the perfectly executed play, the whistle blew, ending the period, and the Polaris unit led 1-0. Breathing deeply, Astro and Roger flopped down near Tom and stretched full length on the grass. "That was a beautiful shot, Roger," said Tom. "Perfectly timed." "Yeah, hot shot," agreed Astro. "I'm glad to see that big head of yours is good for something." "Listen, fellas," said Roger eagerly, ignoring Astro. "To go into the finals against Richards and Capelli unit, we've got to beat Arcturus crew, right?" "Yeah," agreed Tom. "And it won't be easy. We just happen to get the breaks." "Then why don't we put the game on ice?" said Roger. "Freeze the ball. We got them 1-0. That's enough to beat them. When the whistle blows, it's over. We win." Astro looked at Tom, who frowned and replied, "But we've still got 3 periods left, Roger. It isn't fair to freeze this early in the game. If it was the last minute or so, sure, but not so early. It just isn't fair." "What do you want to do?" snarled Roger. "Win or play fair?" "Win, of course, but I want to win the right way," said Tom. "How about you, Astro?" "I feel the same way that Tom does," said the big cadet. "We can beat these guys easily and on the square."
"You guys make it sound like I was cheating," snapped Roger.
"Well," said Tom, It sure isn't giving the Arcturus guys a break. The whistle blew for them to return to the goal line. "Well," asked Roger, "do we freeze or don't we?" "I don't want to, but majority always rules in this unit, Roger." Tom glanced at Astro. "How about it, Astro?" "We can beat them fair and square. We'll play all out," answered Astro. Roger didn't say anything. He moved to one side and took his position for the dash downfield. The whistle blew again and the crowd roared as two teams charged towards the ball. The cadets were eager to see if the Arcturus crew could tie the score, or if the crew of the Polaris would increase its lead. But after a few moments of play, their cries of encouragement subsided into rumbles of discontent. In its eagerness to score, the Arcturus unit kept making errors and lost the ball constantly. But the crew of the Polaris failed to capitalize. The second period ended with the score unchanged. As he slumped to the ground for the rest period, Astro turned on Roger bitterly. "What's the idea, Manning? You're dogging it." "You play your game, Astro," replied Roger calmly. "I'll play mine." "We're playing this game as a team, Roger," chimed in Tom heatedly. "You're kicking that ball all over the lot." "Yeah," added Astro. "In every direction except the goal." "I was never clear," defended Roger. "I didn't want to lose possession of the ball." "You sure didn't," said Tom. "You acted as if it was your best friend and you never wanted to be separated from it." "We said we didn't want to freeze this game, Roger, and we meant it." Astro glowered at his unit mate. "Next period, you show us some action. If you don't want to score, feed it to us and we'll save you the trouble." But the third period was the same. While Tom and Astro dashed up and down the field, blocking out members of the Arcturus crew to give Roger a clear shot, he simply nudged the ball back and forth between sidelines, ignoring his teammates' pleas to drive forward. As the whistle sounded for the end of the period, boos and catcalls from grandstands filled the air. Tom's face was an angry red as he faced Roger again on the sidelines during the rest period. "You hear that, Roger?" he growled, nodding his head towards the stands. "That's what they think of your smart playing." "What do I care?" replied the blonde cadet arrogantly. "They're not playing this game. I am." "And we are too." Astro's voice was a low rumble as he came up behind Manning. "If you don't give us a chance, so help me, I'll use your head for a ball." "If you're so interested in scoring, why don't you go after the ball yourselves then?" said Roger. "Because we're too busy trying to be a team," snapped Tom. "We're trying to clear shots for you." "Don't be so generous," sneered Roger. "I'm warning you, Roger." Astro glared at the arrogant cadet. "If you don't straighten out and fly right..." McKinney's whistle from the far sideline suddenly sounded, interrupting the big cadet, and the three boys trooped back out on the field again. Again, the air was filled with boos and shouts of derision, and Tom's face flushed with shame. This time, when McKinney's hand flashed downward, Tom streaked for the ball instead of Skohari, his usual opponent. He measured his stride carefully and reached the ball in perfect kicking position. He felt the satisfying thud against his foot and saw the ball shoot out high in front of him and head for the goal line. It was a beautiful kick. But then the ball suddenly sank, its flight altered by the action of the Mercury. Running downfield, Tom saw Swift and Allen meet the ball together. Allen blocked it with his chest and crumbed it over to Swift. Swift let the ball drop to the ground, drawing his foot back to kick. But again, the Mercury changed the ball's action, twisting it to one side, and Swift's kick caught it on the side. Instead of the ball going downfield, it veered to the left, into the path of Astro. Quickly getting his head under it, he shifted it to Roger, who streaked in and stopped it with his hip. But then, instead of passing ahead to Tom, who by now was down the field in the open, Roger prepared to kick the goal himself. Tom shouted a warning, but it was too late. Skohari came rushing in behind him, and at a running stride met the ball squarely with his right foot. It sailed high in the air and over the Polaris goal line just as his whistle blew. The game was tied. "That was some play, Manning," said Astro when they were lined up waiting for the next period to begin. "You asked for it," snapped Roger. "You were yapping at me to play, and now look at what's happened." "Listen, you loudmouth punk," said Astro, advancing towards the smaller cadet. But just then the whistle blew, and the three boys ran out onto the field. The Arcturus crew swept down the field quickly, heading for the ball and seemingly ignoring the Polaris unit. But Skohari slipped and fell on the grass and gave Tom a clear shot at the ball. He caught it with the side of his boot and passed it towards Roger. But Allen, at full speed, came in and intercepted, sending the ball in a crazy succession of twists and turns and bounces. The crowd came to its feet as all six cadets made a desperate attempt to clear the skittering ball, with none of them so much as touching it. This was the part of the Mercury ball that pleased the spectator. Finally, Skohari managed to get a toe on it and he sent it downfield, but Astro had moved out to play defense. He stopped the ball with his shoulder and dropped it to the ground. Steadying it there, he waited until Tom was in the clear and kicked it 40 yards to the midfield stripe. The crowd came to its feet, sensing the final drive might mean victory for the Polaris crew. The boys of the Arcturus swarmed in, trying to keep Tom from scoring. With a tremendous burst of speed, Tom reached the ball ahead of Skohari, and with the strength of desperation, he slammed his foot against it. The whistle blew, ending the game as the ball rose in an arc down the field and fell short of the goal by 10 feet. There was a groan from the crowd. But suddenly the ball, still reacting to the mercury inside, spun like a top, rolled sideways, and as if it were being blown by a breeze, rolled towards the goal line and stopped 6 inches inside the white chalk line. There was a moment's pause as the crowd and players, stunned by the play, grasped what happened. Then, swelling into a roar, there was a one-word chant over and over. Polaris! 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 The Polaris unit had reached the finals of the Academy tournament. During the intermission, Charlie Volchek, unit commander of the Capella crew, walked over to the refreshment unit behind the grandstand where Steve Strong, Dr. Dale, and Commander Walters were drinking Martian water and eating space burgers. "Afternoon, Commander," saluted Volchek. "Hello, Joan. Steve. Looks as though your boys and the Polaris are going to meet their match this afternoon. I gotta admit, they're good. But with Tony Richards feeding passes to Al Davison and the blocking of Scott McAvoy," the young officer broke into a grin. "I don't know, Charlie," Commander Walters said with a wink to Dr. Dale. "From the looks of Cadet Astro, if he ever gets his foot on the ball, your Capella unit will just have to go after it with a jet boat." "My commander," replied Volchek, laughing good-naturedly, "Tony Richards is one of the finest booters I've ever seen. Saw him make a goal from the 60-yard line from a standstill." Steve Strong waved a Martian water pop bottle at young Volchek with a gesture of friendly derision. "Did you happen to see the play in the first period?" he boasted. "Manning took a perfect pass from Astro and scored. You're finished, Volchek. You and your Capella unit won't even come close." "From what I hear and see, Manning seems to be a little sore that he can't make all the scores himself," grinned Volchek slyly. "He wants to be the whole show." Strong reddened and turned to put the empty bottle on the counter, using it as an excuse to hide his feelings from the commander and Joan. So Volchek had observed Manning's attitude and play on the field too. Before Strong could reply, a bugle sounded from the field, and the group of Solar Guard officers returned to their seats for the final game of the tournament, between the Capella and Polaris units. Out on the field, Mike made his usual speech about playing fair and gave the cadets routine instructions of the game, reminding them that they were spacemen first, unit members second, and individuals third and last. The 6 boys shook hands and jogged down the field to take up their positions. "How about concentrating on the passes Richards is going to feed to Davison?" Tom asked his unit mates. "Never mind blocking out Richards and McAvoy." "Yeah," agreed Astro. "Play for the ball. Sounds good to me." "How about it, Roger?" asked Tom. "Just play the game," said Roger, and then added sarcastically, "And don't forget to give them every chance to score. Let's play fair and square the way we did with the Arcturus unit." "If you feel that way, Manning," answered Astro coldly, "you can quit right now. We'll handle the Capella guys ourselves." Before Roger could answer, McKinney blew the whistle, and 3 boys lined up along the white chalk line, preparing for the dash to the ball. The cadets in the stand were hushed. McKinney's hand swept up and then quickly down as he blew the whistle. The crowd came to its feet roaring as Tom, 5 steps from his own goal line, tripped and fell headlong to the grass, putting him out of the first play. Astro and Roger charged down the field, with Astro reaching the ball first. He managed a good kick, but Richards, 3 feet away, took the ball squarely in his chest. The mercury ball fell to the ground and spun in a dizzy circle, and with a gentle tap by Richards, rolled to Davison, who took it in stride and sent it soaring for a 45-foot goal. The Capella unit had drawn first blood. "Well, hotshot," snarled Roger back on the starting line, "what happened to the big pass-stealing idea?" "I tripped, Manning," said Tom through clenched teeth. "Yeah, tripped," sneered Roger. The whistle blew for the next goal. Tom, with an amazing burst of speed, swept down the field, broke stride to bring him in perfect line with the ball, and with a kick that seemed almost lazy, sent the ball from a dead standstill 50 yards over the Capella goal before any of the remaining players were within 5 feet of it. And the score was tied. The crowd sprang to its feet again and roared his name. "That was terrific," said Astro, slapping Tom on the back as he lined up again. "It looked as though you hardly kicked the ball at all." "Yeah," muttered Roger. "You really made yourself the grandstand's delight." "What's that supposed to mean, Manning?" asked Astro. "Superman Corbett probably burned himself out. Let's see him keep up that speed for the next 10 minutes. The whistle blew for the next goal, and again the 3 boys moved forward to meet the onrushing Capella unit. Richards blocked Astro with a twist of his body, and without stopping his forward motion, kicked the ball squarely towards the goal. It stopped 10 feet short, took a dizzying spin, and rolled away from the goal line. In a flash, the 6 boys were around the ball, blocking, shoving, and yelling instructions to each other, while at the same time kicking at the unsteady ball. With each grazing kick, the ball went into more maddening spins and gyrations. At last, Richards caught it with the side of his foot, flipped it to McAvoy, who dropped back, and with 20 feet between him and the nearest Polaris member, calmly booted it over the goal. The whistle blew, ending the first period, and the Capella unit led 2-1. During the next 3 periods, the Capella unit worked like a well-oiled machine. Richards passed Davison or McAvoy, and when they were too well guarded, played brilliantly alone. The Polaris unit, on the other hand, appeared to be hopelessly outclassed. Tom and Astro fought like demons, but Roger's lack of interest gave the Capella unit an edge in play. At the end of the 4th period, the Capella team led by 3 points, 7-4. While the boys rested for the 5th and final period, Captain Strong, having watched play with keen interest, realized Roger was not playing to his fullest capabilities. Suddenly he summoned a nearby Earthworm cadet, scribbled a message on a slip of paper, and instructed the cadet to take it directly to Roger. "Orders from the coach on the sidelines?" asked Volchek as he noticed Strong's action. "You might say that, Charlie," answered Steve blandly. On the field, the cadet messenger handed Roger the slip of paper, not mentioning that it was from Strong, and hurried back to the stands. "Getting fan mail already?" asked Astro. Roger ignored the comment and opened the slip of paper and read, "It might interest you to know that the winning team of the Mercury Ball Finals is to be awarded first prize at 3 Days Liberty in Atom City." There was no signature. Roger stared up into the stands and searched vainly for some indication of the person who might have sent him the note. The crowd hushed as McKinney stepped forward for the starting of the last period. "What was in the note, Roger?" asked Tom. "The winning combination," smiled Roger lazily. "Get set for the fastest game of Mercury Ball you've ever played, Corbett. You gotta pull this mess out of the fire." Bewildered, Tom looked at Astro, who merely shrugged his shoulders and took his place ready for the whistle. Roger tucked the note into his shorts and stepped up to the line. "Listen, Corbett," said Roger. "Every time Richards gets the ball, he kicks it to his left, and then McAvoy feints as if to get it, leaving Davison in the open. When you go to block Davison, you leave Richards in the clear. He just keeps the ball. He's scored 3 times that way." "Yeah," said Tom. "I've noticed that, but there's nothing I can do about it, the way you've been playing." "Kinda late in the game for any new ideas, Manning," growled Astro. "Just get the ball and pass it to me." "That's my whole idea. Play back, Astro. Move like you're very tired, see? Then they'll forget about you and play 3-on-2. You just be ready to kick, and kick hard." "What's happened to you, Roger?" asked Tom. "What was in that note?" Before Roger could answer, the whistle and the roar of the crowd signaled the beginning of the last period. The cadets raced down the field, Roger swerving to the left and making a feint at blocking Richards. He missed intentionally and allowed Richards to get the ball, who immediately passed to the left. McAvoy raced in on the ball. Tom made a move as if to block him, reversed, and startled the onrushing Richards with a perfect block. The ball was in the clear. Roger gave it a half kick and the ball landed 2 feet in front of Astro. The big cadet caught it perfectly on the first bounce and kicked it on the line across the goal, 70 yards away. Up in the stands, Steve Strong smiled as he watched the score change on the board. Capella 7, Polaris 5. In rapid succession, the Polaris unit succeeded in intercepting the play of the Capella unit and rolling up 2 more goals to an even score. Now there were only 55 seconds left to play. The cadets in the stand roared their approval of the gallant effort made by the 3 members of the Polaris crew. It had been a long time since Mercury Ball had been played with such deadly accuracy at Space Academy, and everyone who attended the game was to remember for years to come the last play of the game. McKinney blew the whistle again and the boys charged forward, but by now, aware of the sudden flash of unity on the part of the opposing team, the Capella unit fought desperately to salvage at least a tie. Tom managed to block a kick by Richards, and the ball took a dizzy hop to the left, landing in front of Astro. He was in the clear. The stands were in an uproar as the cadets saw the game was nearly over. Astro paused for a split second, judged the ball, and stepped forward to kick. But the ball spun away just as Astro swung his leg, and at that instant McAvoy charged in from the left, only to be blocked by Roger. But the force of McAvoy's charge knocked Roger back into Astro. Instead of kicking the ball, Astro caught Roger on the side of the head. Roger fell to the ground and lay still. He was knocked cold. Astro lost his balance, twisted on one leg unsteadily, and then fell on the ground. When he tried to get up, he couldn't walk. He had twisted his ankle. The Capella unit members stood still, confused and momentarily unable to take advantage of their opportunity. Without a moment's hesitation, Tom swept in and kicked the ball before his opponents realized what had happened. The ball drifted up in a high arc, landed with several bounces, stopping 5 feet from the goal. Suddenly, Richards, McAvoy, and Davison came alive and charged after Tom, who was running for the ball as fast as his weary legs would carry him. He saw Richards pull up alongside him, then pass him. Then Davison and McAvoy closed in on either side to block and give Richards a clear shot back down the field and certain score. Richards reached the ball, stopped, and carefully lined up his kick, certain that his teammates could block out Tom. But the young cadet, in the last desperate spurt, outraced McAvoy and Davison. Then, as Richards cocked his foot to kick, Tom jumped. With a mighty, leaping dive, he sent his body hurtling headlong towards Richards, just as he kicked. Tom's body crashed into the ball and Richards. The two boys went down in a heap, but the ball caromed off his chest and rolled over the goal line. The whistle blew, ending the game. In an instant, 2,000 officers, cadets, and enlisted men went wild as the ball rolled across the goal line. The Polaris crew had won, 8-7. From every corner of the field, the crowd cheered the cadets who had finished the game, had won it in the final seconds with two of them sprawled on the field unconscious, and a third unable to stand on his own feet. Up in the stands, Captain Strong turned to Commander Walters. He found it hard to keep his eyes from filling as he saluted briskly. Captain Strong reporting, sir, on the success of the Polaris unit to overcome their differences and become a fighting unit. And I mean fight. End of Chapter 10. Chapter 11 of Stand By for Mars. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Sean O'Hara. Stand By for Mars by Carey Rockwell. Chapter 11.
Atom City Express now arriving on track 2.
The voice boomed over the loudspeaker system, and as a long, gleaming line of monorail cars eased to a stop with the soft hissing of brakes, the three cadets of the Polaris unit moved eagerly in that direction. "Atom City, here we come!" cried Astro. "We and a lot of others with the same idea," said Tom. And, in fact, there were only a few civilians in the crowd pressing towards the car doors. Uniforms predominated, the blues of the cadets, enlisted men in scarlet, even a few in the black and gold uniforms which identified officers of the Solar Guard. "Personally," whispered Tom to his friends, "first thing I want to do in Atom City is take a long walk, somewhere where I won't see a single uniform." "As for me," drawled Roger, "I'm going to find a stereo studio where they're showing a Liddy Tamal feature. I'll sit down in the front row seat and just watch that girl act for 6 hours. He turned to Astro. "And how about you?" Why, I'll string along with you, Roger," said the cadet from Venus. "It's been a long time since I've seen Tom and Roger laughed. "A what?" teased Tom. Girl," sputtered Astro, blushing. "I don't believe it," said Roger in mock surprise. "I never—" "Come on," interrupted Tom. "Time to get on board." They hurried across the platform and entered the sleek car. Inside, they found seats together and sank into luxurious chairs. Astro sighed gently, stretched out his long legs, and closed his eyes blissfully for a few moments. "Don't wake me till we get started," he said. "We already have," returned Tom. "Take a look." Astro's eyes popped open. He glanced through the clear crystal glass at the rapidly moving landscape. "These express jobs move on super cushioned ball bearings," explained Tom. "Can't even feel it when you pull out of the station." "Well, blast my jets," marveled Astro. "I'd sure like to take a look at the power unit on this baby." "Even on vacation, all this guy can think about is power," grumbled Roger. "How about building up our own power?" suggested Tom. "It's a long haul to Atom City. Let's get a bite to eat." "Okay with me, Space Boy," Astro grinned. "I could swallow a whole steer." "That's a great idea, Cadet," said a voice from behind them. It came from a gray-haired man, neatly dressed in the black one-piece style-on suit currently in fashion, and with a wide red sash around his waist. "Beg pardon, sir," said Tom. "Were you speaking to us?" "I certainly was," replied the stranger. "I'm asking you to be my guest at dinner, and while I may not be able to buy your friend a whole steer, I'll gladly get him a piece of one." "Hey," said Astro, "do you think he means it?" "He seems to," replied Tom. He turned to the stranger. "Thanks very much, sir, but don't think Astro was kidding about his appetite." "I'm sure he wasn't." The gray-haired man smiled and came over and stretched out his hand. "Then it's a deal," he said. "My name's Joe Bernard." "Bernard!" exclaimed Roger. He paled and glanced quickly at his two friends, but they were too busy looking over their new friend to notice. "Glad to know you, sir," said Tom. "I'm Tom Corbett. This is Astro from Venus, and over here is—" "Roger's my name," the third cadet said quickly. "Won't he sit down, sir?" "No use wasting time," said Bernard. "Let's go straight to the dining car." The cadets were in no mood to argue with him. They picked up the small microphones beside their chairs and sent food orders to the kitchen. And by the time they were seated in the dining car, their food orders were ready on the table. Mr. Bernard, with a twinkle in his eye, watched them enjoy their food. In particular, he watched Astro. "I warned you, sir," whispered Tom as the Venusian went to work on his second steak. "I wouldn't have missed this for anything," said Bernard. He smiled, lit a cigar of fine Mercurian leaf tobacco, and settled back comfortably. "And now," he said, "let me explain why I was so anxious to have dinner with you. I'm in the import-export business, shipped to Mars mostly, but all my life I wanted to be a spaceman." "Well, what was the trouble, Mr. Bernard?" asked Roger. The man in black sighed. Couldn't take the acceleration, boys. Bad heart. I send out more than 500 cargoes a year to all parts of the solar system, but myself, I've never been more than a mile off the surface of the Earth. It sure must be disappointing to want to blast off and know that you can't, said Tom. I tried once, said Bernard with a rueful smile. Yep, I tried. He gazed thoughtfully out the window. When I was your age, about 20, I wanted to get into Space Academy worse than anybody I've ever met. He paused. Except for one person, a boyhood buddy of mine named Kenneth. Excuse me, sir, cut in Roger quickly, but I think we better get back to our car. With this big liberty in front of us, we need a lot of rest. But Roger, exclaimed Tom. Bernard smiled. I understand, Roger. Sometimes I forget that I'm an old man. And when you've already tasted the excitement of space travel, talk like mine must seem rather dull. He stood up and faced the three cadets. It's been very pleasant, Corbett, Astro, Roger. Now run along and get your rest. I'll just sit here for a while and watch the scenery. Thank you, sir, said Tom, for the dinner, your company, everything. He finished lamely. There was a chorus of goodbyes and the boys returned to their car, but there was little conversation now. Gradually, the lights in the car dimmed to permit sleep, but Tom kept listening to the subdued click of the monorail and kept wondering. Finally, Roger, sleeping next to him, wakened for a moment. Roger, said Tom, I want to ask you something. Wait till the morning, mumbled Roger. Wanna sleep. The way you acted with Bernard, Tom persisted. You ate his dinner, then acted like he was poisoned. Why was that, Roger? The other sat bolt upright. Listen, he said. Listen. Then he slumped back in his chair and closed his eyes. Let me sleep, Corbett. Let me sleep, I tell you. He turned his back and in a moment was making sounds of deep slumber. But Tom felt sure that Roger was not asleep, that he was wide awake, but something seriously bothering him. Tom leaned back and gazed out over the passing planes and up into the deep black of space. The moon was full, large and round. He could distinguish Mare Imbrium, the largest of Luna's flat plains visible from Earth, where men had built the great metropolis of Luna City. Further out in the deep blackness he could see Mars, glowing like a pale ruby. Before long he would be up there again. Before long he would be blasting off into Polaris with Astro and with Roger. Roger. Why had he acted so strangely at dinner? Tom remembered the night he saw Roger in Galaxy Hall alone at night, and the sudden flash on the field a few days before when he'd won the Mercury Ball game. Was there some reason behind his companion's strange actions? In vain, Tom racked his brain to find the answer. There had to be some explanation. Yet what could it possibly be? He tossed and turned and worried, and finally, comfortable as the monorail car was, he fell asleep from sheer exhaustion. Atom City. Built of the clear crystal mined so cheaply on Titan, the moon of Saturn, Atom City had risen from a barren North American wasteland to become a showplace of the universe. Here was the center of all space communications, a proud city of giant crystal buildings. Here had been developed the first slidewalks, air cars, three-dimensional stereos, and hundreds of other ideas for better living. And here at Atom City was the seat of the Great Solar Alliance, housed in a structure which covered a quarter of a mile at its base, and which towered 3,000 noble feet into the sky. The three cadets stepped out of the monorail and walked across the platform to a waiting air car, jet-powered, shaped like a teardrop and with a clear crystal top. We want the best hotel in town, said Astro grandly to the driver. And get this speed bug out of here in a hurry, Roger told him. There's a lot we want to do. The driver couldn't help smiling at the three cadets so obviously enjoying their first leave. We've got 3 top hotels, he said. One's as good as the other. They're the Earth, the Mars, and the Venus. The Earth, voted Tom. The Mars, shouted Roger. The Venus, roared Astro. All right, said the driver with a laugh. Make up your minds. Which of them is nearest the center of the city, asked Tom. The Mars. Then blast off for Mars, ordered Tom, and the air car shot away from the station and moved up into the stream of expressway traffic 50 feet above the ground. As the little car sped along the broad avenue, Tom remembered how often, as a boy, he'd envied the Space Cadets who'd come to his hometown of New Chicago on leave. Now here he was, in uniform with a 3-day pass, and all of Atom City to enjoy it in. A few minutes later, the air car stopped in front of the Mars Hotel. The cadets saw the entrance loom before them. A huge opening with ornate glass and crystal in many different colors. They walked across the high-ceilinged lobby towards the desk. All around them, the columns that supported the ceiling were made of clearest crystal. Their feet sank in soft, lustrous deep pile rugs made of Venusian jungle grass. The boys advanced towards a huge circular reception desk where a pretty girl with red hair waited to greet them. May I help you? She asked. She flashed a dazzling smile. You're a lucky girl, said Roger. It just so happens you can help me. We'll have dinner together, just the two of us. Then we'll do the stereos, after which we'll... The girl shook her head sadly. I can see your friend's got a bad case of rocket shock, she said to Tom. That's right, Tom admitted. But if you give us a triple room, we'll make sure he doesn't disturb anybody. Ah, said Roger. Go blow your jets. I have a nice selection of rooms here on the photo slides if you care to take a look at them, the girl suggested. How many rooms in this hotel, beautiful? Asked Roger. Nearly 2,000, answered the girl. And you have photo slides of all 2,000? Yes, answered the girl. Why do you ask? You and Astro go take a walk, Corbett, said Roger with a grin. I'll select our quarters. You mean? Asked the girl, a little flustered. You want to look at all the slides? Sure thing, lovely, said Roger with a lazy smile. But that'll take 3 hours. Exactly my idea. Just give us a nice room, miss, said Tom, cutting in. And please excuse Manning. He's so smart he gets dizzy now and then. Have to take him over to the corner and revive him. He glanced at Astro, who picked Roger up by the arms and walked away with him as though he were a baby. Come on, you space Romeo. Hey, ow, hey, let me go, you big ape. You're killing your best friend. Roger twisted around in Astro's voice-like grasp to no avail. Space fever, explained Tom. He'll be okay soon. I think I understand, said the girl with a nervous smile. She handed Tom a small flashlight. Here's your photoelectric light key for room 2305F. That's on the 230th floor. Tom took the light key and turned towards the slide stairs where Astro was holding Roger firmly, despite his frantic squirming. Hey, Tom! Cried Roger. Tell this big Venusian ape to let me go. Promise to behave yourself? Asked Tom. We came here to have fun, didn't we? Demanded Roger. That doesn't mean getting thrown out of the hotel because we gotta make passes to every beautiful girl. What's the matter with beautiful girls? Growled Roger. They're official equipment like a radar scanner. You can't get along without them. Tom and Astro looked at each other and burst out laughing. Come on, you jerk, said Astro. Let's get washed up. I want to take a walk and get something to eat. I'm hungry again. An hour later, showered and dressed in fresh uniforms, the Polaris crew began to tour the city. They went to the zoo and saw dinosaurs, a Tyrannosaurus, and many other monsters extinct on Earth millions of years ago, but still breeding in the jungles of Terra. They visited the council chamber of the Solar Alliance, where delegates from the major planets and from the larger satellites, such as Titan of Saturn, Ganymede of Jupiter, and Luna of Earth, made laws for the Triplanetary League. The boys walked through the long halls of the Alliance building, looking at the great documents which had unified the solar system. They reverently inspected original documents of the Universal Bill of Rights and Solar Constitution, which guaranteed basic freedoms of speech, press, religion, peaceful assembly, and representative government. And even brash, irrepressible Roger Manning was awestruck as he tiptoed through the great chamber of Galactic Court, where the supreme judicial body of the entire universe sat in solemn dignity. Later, the boys visited the Plaza de Olympia, a huge fountain filled with water from the Martian canals, the lakes of Venus, and the oceans of Earth, and ringed by 100 large statues, each one symbolizing a step in mankind's march through space. But then, for the cadets, came the greatest thrill of all, a trip through the mighty Hall of Science, at once a museum of past progress and a laboratory for the development of future wonders. Thousands of experiments were being conducted within this crystal palace, and as Space Cadets, the boys were allowed to witness a few of them. They watched a project which sought to harness the solar rays more effectively, another which aimed to create a new type of fertilizer for Mars so people on that planet would be able to grow their own food in their arid deserts instead of importing all of it from other worlds. Other scientists were trying to adapt Venusian jungle plants to grow on other planets with a low oxygen supply, while still others, in the medical field, sought for a universal antibody to combat all diseases. Evening finally came, and with it time for fun and entertainment. Tired and leg-weary, the cadets stepped onto the slidewalk and allowed themselves to be carried to a huge restaurant in the heart of Atom City. Food, exulted Astro as crystal doors swung open before them. Smell it. Real honest-gosh food. He rushed for a table. Hold it, Astro, shouted Tom. Take it easy. Yeah, added Roger. It's been 5 hours since your last meal, not 5 weeks. Meal? Snorted the Venusian cadet. You call 5 space burgers a meal? And anyway, it's been 6 hours, not 5. Laughing, Tom and Roger followed their friend inside. Luckily, they found a table not far from the door, where Astro grabbed the microphone and ordered his usual tremendous dinner. The three boys ate hungrily as course after course appeared in the middle of the table via the direct shaft from the kitchen. So absorbed was Manning that he did not notice the approach of a tall, dark young man about his own age, dressed in the red-brown uniform of the passenger space service. But the young man, who wore a captain's high-billed hat, suddenly caught sight of Roger. "Manning!" he called. "What brings you here?" "Al James!" cried Roger and quickly got up to shake hands. "Of all the guys in the universe to show up, sit down and have a bite with us." The space skipper sat down. Roger introduced him to Tom and Astro. There was a round of small talk. "Whatever made you become a space cadet, Roger?" asked James finally. "Oh, you know how it is," said Roger. "You can get used to anything." Astro almost choked on a mouthful of food. He shot a glance at Tom, who shook his head, as though warning him not to speak. James grinned broadly. "I remember how you used to talk back home. The Space Cadets are a bunch of tin soldiers trying to feel important. The Academy was a lot of space gas. I guess now you've changed your mind." Maybe I have," said Roger. He glanced uneasily at his two friends, but they pretended to be busy eating. "Maybe I have." Roger's eyes narrowed. His voice became a lazy drawl. "Now that is better than being a man in a monkey suit, with nothing to do but impress the passengers and order around the crew." "Wait a minute. What kind of a crack is that?" said James. "No crack at all. Just the way I feel about you passenger gents who don't know a rocket tube from a ray gun nozzle." "Look, Manning," returned James, "no need to get sore just because you couldn't do any better than Space Cadets." "Blast off!" shouted Roger. "Before I fuse your jets." Tom spoke up. "I think you better go outside, Captain." "I've got 6 men outside," sneered the other. "I'll go when I'm ready." "You're ready now," spoke up Astro. He stood up to his full height. "We don't want any trouble," the cadet from Venus said. "But we're not breaking our jets to get away from it either." James took a good look at Astro's powerful frame. Without another word, he walked away. Tom shook his head. "That pal of yours is a real Space Cadet fan, isn't he, Roger?" "Yeah," said Astro. "Just like Manning is himself." "Look," said Roger. "Look, you guys." He hesitated, as though intending to say something more, but then he turned back to his dinner. "Go finish your food," he growled. He bent over his plate and ate without lifting his eyes, and not another word was spoken at table until a young man approached carrying a portable teleceiver screen. "Pardon me," he said. "Is one of you Cadet Tom Corbett?" "Why, I am," acknowledged Tom. "There's a call for you. Seems they've been trying to reach you all over Atom City." He placed the teleceiver screen on the table, plugged it into a floor socket, and set the dials. "Hope there's nothing wrong at home," said Tom to his friends. "My last letter from Mom said Billy was messing around with a portable atom reactor, and she was afraid he might blow himself up." A picture began to take shape on the screen. "My gosh," said Astro. "It's Captain Strong." "It certainly is," said the Captain's image. "Having dinner, eh, boys? Those baked shrimp look good." "They're terrific," said Astro. "Wish you were here." "Wish you could stay there," said Captain Strong. "Oh no," moaned Astro. "Don't tell me." "Sorry, boys," came the voice from the teleceiver. "But that's it. You've got to return to the Academy immediately. The whole Cadet Corps has been ordered into space for special maneuvers. You blast off tomorrow morning at 600. "But sir," objected Tom, "we can't get a monorail until morning." "This is an official order, Corbett, so you have priority over all civilian transportation." Solar Guard Captain smiled. "I've tied up a whole bank of teleceivers in Atom City searching for you. Get back to Space Academy fast. Commandeer an air car if you must, but be here by 600 hours. The captain waved a cheery goodbye, and the screen went dark. "Space maneuvers," breathed Astro. "The real thing." "Yeah," agreed Tom. "Here we go." "Our first stop into deep space," said Roger. "Let's get out of here." End of Chapter 11.